Welcome, everybody. It's your boy, the Versace Stoner, with another episode of VSW. Thank you, everybody. It's your boy, the Versace Stoner, alongside
the Disabled here
with a very special edition of VSW. Tonight, we're talking to the loose cannon, Ray Rancin. We have him ready to talk with us now. What is up, Ray?
Just the usual. Thank you guys for having me on the podcast. Really appreciate you letting me come on here and speak my piece. And I look forward to doing this for the next, what are we going to do, half hour, 45 minutes? How long are we on for this?
It runs about that, around between like a half an hour, 45 minutes usually.
Perfect. I mean, I could talk all night, but all right, you guys ask me whatever you want. I'm ready to go.
Well, I mean, I've seen a little bit of you. I've watched some YouTube videos. I did a little bit of research, but tell me a little bit about your career. I mean, when did you get into wrestling? When and where?
Sure. Well, I first broke in a long time ago, and I had actually taken a long break. I want to say 15 years. I've been, out, and then just a couple years ago, I had the chance to compete for reunion wrestling. The Mac Attack got a hold of me. They asked me if I wanted to participate, and I said sure. And now it's been about 2 years. I've been going strong, and that's the long and short of it, to answer your question.
Very good. Yeah, that reunion wrestling seems to be taking off right now. With what is it, like weekly episodes or weekly matches?
We are doing weekly episodes. So the way it works is, because we've put on a few shows, 4 to be precise, and each event is represented by a series. And then each episode represents a particular match. And so far, we're on our 3rd season. We're getting ready to start up season 4 over the next couple of weeks. So I definitely suggest that, all your fans check that out. I'll be giving you the links if I haven't already. That way the fans can, look into reunion wrestling and decide if, it's for them. I think
we'll definitely share it out on all our social media fronts, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, wherever we have a voice, we'll definitely spread it. Like you said, this is now your almost 4th season into it. You actually were in the last match, were you not?
That is correct. The most recent episode does have me in there, and I don't want to give too much away for your fans that haven't had the occasion to check it out yet, but I am there. I make my presence known, as I always do whenever I'm on a card. So your fans are in for a real treat when they tune in. So, definitely let them know that, Loose Cannon Ray Rancin is back, and I'm going to be sticking around for a while.
Very good.
Good.
Very good. Now, let me ask you a question about that nickname, Loose Cannon. There's only been one other person in wrestling I've ever heard with that nickname, and that's, the late Brian Pillman. How did you gain that nickname?
Well, I have to admit, I did borrow from Brian Pillman. Brian Pillman was one of those guys growing up that I emulated. I love that character. And when I was much younger watching that on TV, I said to myself, that's what I need. I think that's going to be my persona. If I ever get into professional wrestling, and that was in the mid-'90s when I was watching Pillman with then WWF, now WWE, of course. Yep. And again, that was the pact I made to myself. If I ever get into professional wrestling, that is the persona I'm going to go with. I'm going to call myself the Loose Cannon and try to follow Brian Pillman, as best as I could. And, of course, we all know what happened with him and his untimely passing. But, that persona, to me, it's one of my all-time favorites. And he's one of my influences, obviously, hence the name Loose Cannon. But there are a few others, like Roddy Piper, Bruiser Brody, and I could go on and on.
Definitely with the old school wrestlers from back in the day. That's very impressive. I'm an old school wrestling fan myself. I've started watching in the early 80s and fell in love with the characters mostly, like the characters like George the Animal Steel. You had the crazy managers like the Wizard and Mr. Fuji. You had a lot more of a different... Wrestling would seem to me more larger than life than it is today, but I see it coming back that way now, with these different shows that I see, like the Reunion Show and some other, indie scene shows around the area. I'm seeing a return almost of the older style of wrestling.
Well, you're right. If you believe that, everything, comes in circles, then, it just makes sense that now we're kind of coming back to, the way it was, 20 years ago and 30 years ago with, these characters that, as you say, they're larger than life. And, I was drawn by those types of characters growing up myself. And I, every time I go out there, I do my absolute best to be a lunatic inside the ring. And see, those who know me best might tell you that I'm equally volatile outside the ring as well. But, I'll let your audience be the judge either way.
So, I would like to ask you a question about if you had to pick one wrestler in the mainstream of the indie scene to face, and you could have a month to build it up, who would it be?
Oh, that's a great question. And there's so many names that, come to mind. But if you're asking me to give you just one and only one,
you can have a little more. I don't care.
Okay. All right.
Well, let's give you a top three. Top three. Let's make it easier for you.
I appreciate that. Okay, let's go with... Well, Kurt Angle. I mean, I know he's been in and out with injuries over the past few years, but Kurt Angle's always somebody I wanted to, because the other thing that I should probably tell you is I grew up with amateur wrestling. I wrestled a little bit in middle school, a little bit in high school, and have done some judo. So
you have the technical background.
I have a little bit of a technical background, and Kurt Angle has always been one of those guys that I've always emulated, because to me, not to steal a cliche, but sorry, Lex Luger, you're not the total package. When I think of somebody with the total package, I think of Kurt Angle. So definitely Kurt Angle would be on that list.
Luger flopped in WWF to be the guy to replace Hogan. Not even close.
Right. Another guy I always enjoyed, and I know he's been retired for a little bit, but Ric Flair, always wanted to. I mean, if you could grant me one wish and say, okay, who do you want to wrestle? Certainly Ric Flair would be on that list.
Woo!
That would be a good matchup, I think, overall, because like you said, you do bring a certain, not to ruin it for fans, but you bring a certain style to the ring from the matches that I saw. And with your technical expertise, I think you and Flair could put on a really good matchup. Better than people would expect.
Well, I must say I'm highly flattered by that. I'd like to think that I could go in there with anybody, but of course I'm going to say that, and some of your audience might be thinking, well, that's just grandiosity, and there's no way somebody like that guy could hang with Ric Flair. But you never say never.
I always tell us, I say this every time on my podcast, the only difference between the indie guys that I talk to on here and the people that you see on TV is that somebody recognized them, somebody picked them up, somebody with a lot of money said, hey, I want that person. That's the only difference. They got noticed. everybody that I've seen wrestle live has that potential to get noticed. It's just a matter of when.
That's a great point. I'm glad you said that, and that's what I'm aiming to do. That's why, when I was given this opportunity to come on your podcast and speak to you both, and hopefully reach out to your fan base, I jumped at it because that is so true. It's really about getting yourself in a position to be recognized by the populace, and then hope that leads to, bigger and better things down the line. Sure.
I mean, we've seen it plenty of times out of New England. There's a lot of talent that's moved to bigger and better promotions, all the way up to the WWE as of just a couple months ago, So it definitely can happen, especially in this area. I feel like a lot of eyes are on the New England wrestling scene just because we have that history. We have the legacy of the Kowalski School, the New England Pro School. We have a lot of history up here.
Yes, you're absolutely right. From Triple H to Kevin Sullivan, he's from the Boston area.
John Cena.
You had Sasha Banks out here training.
The War Raiders.
Yep, Ivar, and Eric there. So, you've had a bunch of people come through here. And like I said, when I started this podcast, originally, my whole point of it was to actually just get more eyes on the independent scene because it doesn't get enough credit. I go to a lot of shows, and obviously not during the pandemic when everything was shut down, but before that, I was going to a lot of shows every week, and I see that these great, tremendous matches, and I'm thinking like, wow, like this is amazing, but there's about 45 people in the crowd, and that's all that's going to be able to see this. So, I started to take clips, started to take more videos, started to, take notes, started to do, like, little reports.
NCW is a great example of that.
I started out there, and I worked my way up just so people get to know names and faces of, talent that could actually go somewhere. And this is where it is now, in this point where I'm starting to take on callers. I'm starting to, check out even more independent shows outside of New England and venturing a little further.
And I'm starting my Boston Sports podcast per se, but my whole point is to bring most Boston sports fans I know watching the Attitude Era. If they're older, they watch it during the Hogan rock and roll days. I want to bring them more eyes on the wrestling scene too.
And if I may add to that, the great thing about the age in which we live, with technology being so advanced that anyone at any time, anywhere, can check out any kind of wrestling as long as they have a Wi-Fi connection, whether it's reunion wrestling, chaotic wrestling, or wherever there might be wrestling taking place. Fans have the opportunity to check out content from all over the globe.
Exactly, and in all eras. You could actually search YouTube, start typing in 70s wrestling. You can find all sorts of stuff that, you probably didn't even know existed in the wrestling world. And that's the wonderful thing about today. It's a double-edged sword, of course, in social media. There's a lot of negativity, which I try not to bring to my podcast. There's a lot of downing of different promotions. There's a lot of fan bashing wrestling. There's a lot of just bullshit on social media. With that being said, though, we do things a little different here at VSW. We try not to bring anybody down. But yeah, it is a great era to live in where we can just, instantly share these things or instantly, tell our friends, hey, check out this show. And they can watch it, almost the second we send it. It really is.
It's a wonderful thing. And and at Reunion Wrestling, we're throwing our hat in there to, get ourselves noticed. And we've only been at this for a couple of years, but I think we're doing a good job. And, we have, a nice variety. We have some established guys that, are still fairly young in their own right and still have quite a bit left in their tank, such as Scott Levesque. We have Eric Dillon. We have the Mac Attack, and those are all names on the indie scene that they have a little bit of a following.
You have on one of our past guests, I think, Mike Montero.
Yes, Mike Montero, who has done a tremendous job, and I love his style. And every time, he's been on a card, he's given his absolute best. A lot of energy from him, as well as Jamie Tucker, AJ Phoenix, just to name a few. So, by and large, it's a younger locker room, and I think that's to our advantage. I mean, we have so much energy, and I think when the fans, watch our product, and they'll be able to recognize that immediately.
I mean, don't get me wrong, there is still a lot of great talent on the indie scene, but I think it also, in a way, right now is a transition point. A lot of people are moving on, and I think, that younger generation that you just kind of mentioned with those names are, breaking in, and they're making a name for themselves as, the people that are moving on did years ago. And it's a beautiful thing to see, especially when you follow these guys from the very beginning. You've been following them for years and years. You can see the progression when you watch their matches. And you can see, how better they've gotten at their promos and how much better they've gotten at their moves. It's really interesting to watch the progression of that.
Of course, and that's the thing, when... like anything else, when people are really dedicated to a particular craft and they invest the time and the effort to continuously improve, it stands out. And that's what we do at Reunion Wrestling. I mean, we look for those types of individuals that are, committed to that, level of quality, and will just continue to, give 150% every single time.
That's great. I mean, with that kind of setup, you're almost, destined not to fail and getting, a very good show almost every time. So let me ask you this, though. I mean, you said you've been doing it a couple of years with Reunion Wrestling. How has the pandemic impacted that, not having fans, not being able to, run shows or train regularly?
Well, it's difficult. I mean, and there's an adjustment, of course, that has to be made because, especially, last year where gyms were shutting down and people had to get really creative on how they were going to stay physically active, maintain, their level of fitness for when, the world opened back up again and we were able to start hosting live events. So what we've been doing at Reunion Wrestling, to answer your question, is just, for lack of a better term, having private shows. So, it's mostly just friends and family that are coming out. So that way, we're not as concerned about all the CDC guidelines and the social distancing protocols that come with that. And, we're able to still at least have some people out there to work off that, because without fans, there's no wrestling. So, you need the people out there cheering and booing.
You need that energy,
so sure. With the charisma and everything else. Fans are what make wrestling memorable, to be honest.
You're certainly right.
So, I mean, that sounds like good. You guys were able to kind of get creative at what you had to do and not just be at a dead standstill. I know a lot of promotions for a while were at a dead standstill, and some didn't even survive. So that's great to hear that. I always like to hear the stories of, what happened during this time period. How did you guys move on? It was a pretty devastating time across the board. Everything was shut down, We were right in the middle of ready to start to just pop off on this podcast. We had shows lined up to go to and cover, and then all of a sudden the whole world just shut down. We were just like, okay, nothing to do now. As the months have been getting better and better, we've been able to do more and more. And, here in Mass, shows are starting to come with fans. We're starting to get limited capacity crowds, which has been nice. It's been fun, to get back to it.
Right, and we were getting pretty creative with how we were able to, again, negotiate just, the circumstances of the pandemic. For example, in October last year, we actually just had an outdoor show. One of the guys had a nice, great big yard where we were able to just set up the ring. And we said, hey, regardless of who shows up, we're gonna make this happen. We did it, and I'd like to think we did so quite successfully.
This is kind of like what the Good Brothers did there with that outdoor show. Just kind of like let it go, you know. And I think that kind of stuff is creative, you know, and it does bring a different style to wrestling. You know, a lot of times now in this modern day, people just think of wrestling as, you know, a ring in an arena or a ring in a hall. And it doesn't actually have to be that way, you know. When wrestling first started, it was wrestling at a fairground. You know, it was a carny thing. There was no going to, you know, Madison Square Garden or anything like that. That was for real sports at the time. So, you know, we've come a long way in wrestling, but it doesn't have to be in this black and white box. You can have matches almost anywhere that there's two wrestlers.
Oh, of course. And I think that's part of the charm and the appeal of professional wrestling is wherever a ring can be set up and there are wrestlers to come on there and you know, work hard for a crowd. You're right, we can do that. Just like, as you said, in the carnival days where, you know, there might have been a ring set up in a tent somewhere and maybe 100 people at most, but that didn't stop the performers from going out there and doing what they do best. So you're right, it doesn't have to be just limited to, you know, a 10,000 seat arena or even like a 5,000 seat venue. I mean, wherever you can have wrestlers and fans, you just you take every chance you get to entertain. And I think that's what the pandemic kind of taught us too, as far as for those involved in professional wrestling. It's just about entertaining the fans and doing whatever can be done to achieve that. Then that's what should be done, always.
No, most definitely, and I think, you know, for the most part, a lot of companies have succeeded, you know, in providing us great wrestling and entertainment during this pandemic, much more than I actually expected, you know. In the beginning, I was very, you know, I didn't really think we would see much of anything. WWE said they were going to be considered, you know, essential in Florida, so we would get some kind of basic TV program, but I never thought we would start seeing, you know, independent, you know, wrestling promotions start launching great weekly content. And when that happened, I just was like, I'm all in, because, you know, now I can really have something to look at, something to cover. I mean, it's great covering just, you know, during regular seasons of wrestling but the shows are months apart. Now you got, you know, detailed stories being told on a weekly basis. It's really something that's coming together, I think.
Well, for sure. And no, it's great to see that, you know, we're you know, returning to, you know, some degree of normalcy with that. And of course, we over at Reunion Wrestling, we're looking to, you know, start running shows a little more routinely and just continue to build our audience.
Definitely, and we'll definitely help you with that. Like we said, you know, you
definitely
send us
to see
any
a show.
links that you send, we will definitely share them everywhere we are. Like I said, I love to support independent wrestling. It's just one of my passions.
Because there's a lot of great up and coming talent, and I mean, for the past 25 to 30 years, I mean, that's really been where, you know, guys and girls can go to hone their craft and apply their trade, is through working independent promotions, and then, you know, having their eyes set on, you know, the big leagues, whether it be WWE or New Japan. I know AEW now. I mean, they're starting to come into the fold, and, you know, they've developed quite a following. So, but really, where it starts is the indies. So it's about keeping the indie scene as active and as strong as possible.
Most definitely. You know, and that's one thing that's great about the indie scene, that, you know, when wrestling is in full swing, it's a very busy scene. You got, you know, maybe
some people
15,
wrestle 4 or 5 days a week.
4 or 5 days a week. You got maybe 15, 20 shows between Friday and Sunday.
And that's great to hear. And I think that just is indicative of the state of wrestling, you know, in this era. Because for a while there, I wasn't sure and I don't know about you guys, but I was starting to worry. I mean, are we gonna, go back to the early '90s where it seemed like pro wrestling was just dying on the vine? But with all these different organizations that are coming up and promoting, it's always a positive
for a while,
to hear that.
Definitely wrestling in general was stale, even after, I mean, the 90s was bad, but even worse was for me was the early 2000s was just kind of cringe. I've seen a lot of just when the whole merge happened and all that, and then later on, after Benoit and that, in the PG era, and just a lot of fans fell off, and
a lot of people I know stopped watching 10 plus years ago.
And it's hard, it was hard for a while for me to strike up a conversation in a daily basis with someone about wrestling. Now it's a lot easier. There's a lot more fans. A couple of years later, people are starting to watch again. People are starting to watch indie wrestling. They're watching New Japan. It's a lot more accessible. They're watching Ring of Honor, a lot more accessible. Now with Twitch gaining its popularity, a lot more promotions are able to stream their product through that. So a lot more people are getting their eyes on product. And wrestling's becoming much more popular again.
And that's encouraging, especially, and I keep going back to reunion wrestling, but I just like to think that, we're one such example of one of these promotions that is, doing, all it can to, maximize, ourselves and take advantage of the technology that's available to, get ourselves seen in places where we may not otherwise be seen,
Yeah, definitely. I mean, where you guys are located out of where? Rhode Island?
Rhode Island and eastern Massachusetts, so along the
right on the
Mass Rhode Island border.
Yeah. So you figure this way, about 20 years ago, in the wrestling scene, only people that would see that would be New England. You wouldn't. Now you can get people from out of country to watch your matches. If they're on YouTube, you can get all sorts of fans. It's crazy. Even on my podcast, I got a small following in India. How did that happen? I mean, it's just a worldwide phenomenon that can take place now with the internet, and that's great for wrestling, and that's great for individuals to be able to get showcased.
Absolutely, and I think your particular instance, I think, just perfectly exemplifies the importance and the impact of having that technology available and using it to really shine.
Exactly. Absolutely. And then my other question for you guys is, where'd you hope to wrestle for other promotions besides Reunion? Any in mind?
Well, that's a great question. And I can tell you personally, I can't speak for anybody else, so I won't. But if you're asking me directly, one goal I always had was to wrestle in Japan. Going back to when I was, a teenager and getting to watch the tapes of New Japan and All Japan. And, I know for a lot of up-and-coming guys, Japan was always a place where people wanted to go because, the money was good and there was exposure. So, if that was ever presented to me, I would certainly say yes to that. Or, whether it be Mexico, Canada. Ideally, that's what I would like to do, is make a name for myself internationally if there's ever the possibility of that. That being said, I'm totally wide open to going wherever, because I understand that that's just, part of being in the business. You got to go where the opportunities are and let yourself, be seen in the best light possible.
Definitely. And to bring it back to what you said, you said something about Japan and just growing up watching, wanting to always be there. And, I always, myself growing up would watch, I didn't watch New Japan regularly or All Japan or any of that, but, I would watch when WWF stars would get sent over there. Because, I'd be like, oh, this is my home federation. I'd feel all proud, they're representing. It was a big deal for, people like Andre the Giant or even Hulk Hogan to get invited to Japan. And when they did, they actually gave us some of the best matches that we ever could see. I still think to this date, Hogan's best match was in Japan. But, to bring it back, today, it's a lot more tangible to get there. It's a lot more known. New Japan's running in the States. But I still see it as, something more prestigious than even just, being part of a U.S.-based company is, like you said, that international spotlight. What steps would you take to, get there? Would you contact them? Would you try to, try to get bookings in on a smaller international scale?
Well, that's the thing. I would, obviously look to just, showcase my my footage that I have to different promotions, to see which ones would be most interested and using someone like myself. So that's really the route I would go, and going through our YouTube channel and just making sure that we're putting that out there for people and getting our recognition that way too. So that those would be the ways for me to go to get myself to that next level.
Just keep showcasing and showing what you can do with your in-ring abilities.
Precisely.
Very good. And in reunion wrestling, so like you said, is there a champion there?
Yes, there is.
So there is a world champion. That is good. Like I said, I'm gonna be honest. I'm rather new to reunion wrestling. Mac started sending me videos maybe a month ago to check it out, and I started watching. And I started falling in love, and people have been showing me stuff online. Then I've been going back and kind of trying to follow through on YouTube. One of these days, I have to just take the day and just kind of binge watch everything, in order. But now I've been just going match by match or things that I want, people that I know or people that I wanted to see. But definitely something that I want to get, more and more familiar with as, time is going, as more shows come up. Like you said, you guys do have the hot young talent that's out there right now.
Yes, we do. And I'd like to think that what we're doing right now is just different from what everybody else has to offer. Now, whether or not that's better than the competition, I'll let your fans and our fans at Reunion Wrestling make that determination. But I'd like to think that again that what we're doing is unique enough that we can establish a fan base and just as I said earlier, continue growing
Exactly.
Reunion Wrestling and making it known regionally and then hopefully nationally if, we ever get to that.
That's our long-term goal of VSW is to get indie scene to be known more nationally.
Exactly, and travel the country, because, not just New England, obviously all across the country has an independent wrestling scene. Any state you go in at least has one promotion running, I believe. I don't know about Alaska, but I'm pretty sure they do.
That's a great question. I remember hearing about, the WWF running shows in Alaska back in the 80s, but I don't know if they ever established an indie scene up there, but you can always look into that, I'm sure.
Exactly, but like I said, it's pretty tangible in almost anywhere in the States, you're going to find, I see a lot of people even online all across the country, and they're all, different promotions, and I'd love to someday just, go on a world or a national tour of just checking out indie promotions and just seeing who's out there as far as, who's this promotion's champion, who are their stars. It'd be something
that sounds
fun.
Great. Maybe you can be the next Dave Meltzer.
I'd run it the right way, though. I'd be
yeah.
in a more positive note, and hopefully people would like me more.
Well, I'm sure they would. I like the way you guys run your podcast. You guys have been great to me. So, I definitely appreciate you guys letting me come on here and say what I wanted to say. And again, I can't thank you enough.
That's our
Definitely.
platform.
And if you have to, let me just live this. If you want to leave, what would you leave with your fans? If you have to let anybody know, if you wanted to watch anything upcoming, what should they look out for?
Well, again, we have Season 4 of Reunion Wrestling coming up over the next couple of weeks. So I would strongly suggest that, they keep on the lookout for that, because that's coming up. And, they can go back and watch the first 3 seasons on YouTube as a way to, catch up and get a better understanding of, who we are and what we're about. I'll give you guys the link if you don't already have it. I'm sure you'll share it with your fans here. But if you type in The Monster Max Show, no spaces, into YouTube, it should pop up, because that's what I did, just as a test for you guys, so that way I could give that out to you. And the Reunion Wrestling episodes are all right there. They can subscribe to the YouTube channel and feel free to enjoy those matches whenever they like.
Very good. And we thank you again for coming on the show, Ray Rancin.
I owe you guys the thanks, because anytime someone like myself can get some exposure and spread the word, it's always a great thing. So again, really appreciate you guys taking time and letting me spend a few minutes with you.
Great. We're glad we can help, and hopefully we get to see you soon and live in person, and everything's open back up and we get to come out there and check out Reunion Wrestling live. I think that would be something that the VSW would definitely like to cover more.
Absolutely. Help you guys get up.
Yeah, we'd appreciate that, and I'll be in touch with you guys, and we'll arrange something for sure.
Definitely.
So that way you guys can come down, check us out, and you decide, if we're worth it or not. But I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised if you ever come down and watch one of our events live and in color.
Very good. I think we will too.
Thank you very much for your time tonight.
You're quite welcome, and hope you gentlemen have a great night.
You as well.
Too.
Thank you.
All right. See you next time. Take care.
Bye.
What a great Q&A for Sachi.
That was one of my favorite. I always love, bringing people on that I might not be,
Let them air things out too.
Especially someone that I'm not, 100% familiar with. Someone
Me
that I
neither,
need to actually, I need to know their information. Some people I know it and I'll ask it anyways. Other people, I want to know the information, and it was just a great overall intro, and it got me to want to watch, Reunion Wrestling. I say I have to check it out.
Go down to Rhode Island and check it out with you.
I'm going to go on to the Mad Tag Show later on tonight on YouTube. I'm going to have to start from episode 1 and work my way all the way to where they are now. But I hope, let me say this. I say anybody listening, do the same. Check it out. Let us know what you think. Let, them know what you think. This is a kind of an up-and-coming thing. They're really pushing to get it out there. Let's help them with that. Let's get their name out there. And with that being said, I hope everybody has a good night. We'll be back. We have a busy, busy week for you all. Wednesday night, we're interviewing John Alba directly after Limitless the Road.
And
that's
we got
right.
some blood and guts.
We will have a Blood and Guts recap coming at you Thursday. And Saturday, we will recap Thursday night's Beyond show.
Denver, Colorado, and the gang are at the White Eagle.
So we are going to have a full-packed week of wrestling enjoyment for you. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Have a good night. Versace Stoner out.
Disable Fout.